believe that this will not... I love you. Hello and welcome to Crosstalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Lavelle. How many foreign troops are fighting in Syria? There are more and more American boots there. What's next in the latest WikiLeaks document dump? And how is that draining of the swamp going? Cross-talking some of the stories making the news. I'm joined by my guest here in Moscow, Mark Sloboda. He's an international affairs and security analyst. We also have Dmitry Babich. He is a political analyst with Sputnik International. And we have Alex Christofora. He is the director and writer for the Duran.com. All right, gentlemen, crosstalk rules. In fact, that means you can jump in anytime you want, and I always appreciate it. Demon, let me go to you first here. We have a lot of news flow coming out of Syria, not that you would notice it much in the mainstream media, but a lot of things are happening. Is this going to turn into Donald Trump's Syrian war? Because it seems like there's a much more hands-off approach. We have American troops going into Kuwait, and he's going to allow his commanders to make decisions how these deployments are going to be used. This is a remarkable difference from the Obama administration. And plus we have the Gulf countries, we have Turkey, we have the government in Damascus, we have Iran, we have Hezbollah, we have Israel, the usual mix here. And the Kurds, let's not forget about that.
Right. Well, I'm afraid we have a very dangerous situation here because first, the ultra-liberals have proven that they can rule the United States without winning elections. You know, they actually call the shots there. In the same way, we see wars waged without the president. You know, we have already got accustomed.
It's very important here. There's no authorization to be sending in any troops into Syria.
No speeches.
Again, I will say it. This is a gross violation of international law. Syria's sovereignty is being violated. The Syrian government has not agreed to this here. The usual stuff.
The funny thing is that the president is not even explaining this. We haven't heard any speeches. We haven't heard any explanations. Just the United States decided to send more troops to Syria.
Okay, why, Mark? Because are they there to fight terrorists or not?
That's the $10 million question.
Good.
What we have right now, we have conflicting signals, okay? And that is perfectly understandable. During the Obama administration, we also had conflicting, the CIA and the Pentagon were each running their own operations, often against each other in Syria. And this, to some extent, is still going on. However, all indications are that the Trump administration has cut off funding, arms, and supplies to the MOMS centers, as they were called in Turkey, that were funding the FSA and other Islamist rebels that were allied with al-Qaeda in Syria. That is a big change, right? That is what Trump promised to do.
But Alex, what's happening also is that one can look at it from a different perspective, is that the American troops going into Syria are to keep their allies from fighting each other, the Turks and the Kurds. I mean, that's not a good reason to be in a foreign country for fighting a foreign intervention.
No, and Assad said so, that anyone that is not in Syria under the invitation of the Syrian government is indeed an invader, and he specifically said that during an interview.
Russia, Iran, Iraq, Hezbollah.
Yeah. And he pointed to the fact that Russia is there legally, and they're legally there to help the sovereign, democratically elected Syrian government beat back ISIS. But I think the bigger story here is that we are seeing ISIS is in defeat right now, and the big question is what's going to be the peace afterwards.
Well, yeah, what's interesting, are the Americans showing up because they want a seat at the table to decide the fate of Syria? Because this war has been going on for many years right now. The West hasn't been fighting terrorists. One could make the very strong argument that they've been aiding and abetting terrorists.
Well, my impression is that the United States is simply not at the table right now. The things were decided in Moscow this week when the Turkish President Erdogan and the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu both came to Moscow for marathon negotiations. And obviously, I see the situation in the following way. One American ally, the Turks, were preparing to fight another American ally, the Kurds in Manbij.
It's happened many times before.
Yes, right. Russia again saved the United States from humiliation, just like it did.
Erdogan, I would say as well. I mean, you have a Turkish leader that is more and more isolated. We've said that on this program.
Well, in what way? I mean, Russia negotiated that the Syrian troops would enter Manbij and not the troops of the Kurdish militia or of the Turks. And in this this way, Russia prevented a major confrontation for the second time in 3 years, in 2013, when the United States were preparing to bomb the Syrian army, which would lead to a disaster. You know, Russia sort of resolved the situation by suggesting to move out the chemical weapons out of Syria. So for the second time in a row, Mr. Putin saves the situation without getting any thanks for that.
You're only going to hear that on this program and on this station here, okay?
Okay, the situation is a little bit more complicated than that, right? This is a war of maneuver around Manbij, east of Al-Bab at this point, and basically what the Russians and Syrians have done in cooperation, in coordination with the U.S. Pentagon-backed SDF, and we have to remember that the Pentagon and the CIA were running completely different programs. The Pentagon was never focusing on regime change. They were fighting ISIS, and that's why they trained the Kurds. That's what they're continuing to do. They transferred some areas outside of Manbij to Russia and Syrian government forces, actually most of them were Russian special forces, in order to prevent Erdogan's invasion and occupation from spreading east to Manbij, but even further to Raqqa, which Erdogan has said both of these cities must belong to the Arabs, by which he means his own proxy FSA terrorists in Syria. So essentially right now we have to assume that the Pentagon is okay with this, and they have had actually military troops also parading around here, letting Erdogan know Russian troops, American troops, Kurds cooperating together to prevent U.S. ally Erdogan from expanding east in Syria. And the U.S. is still operating out of Incirlik and other Turkish military bases.
Alex, I mean, square the circle, or maybe it's impossible. The United States and its allies are working with the Kurds, and they have their NATO ally Turkey. This is a film that's going to end very badly.
Here's the deal. Right now, there's a race for Raqqa. And my fear is that the U.S. is just kind of coming in late into the game. They're going to swoop in. They're going to meet the Russian side and the Syrian side in the middle of the city, and they're going to start to negotiate a deal for Syria. What that deal's going to be, who knows? There's so many interests, like Mark said.
They could have done it many times.
But now they're going to do it in a fashion where both militaries are kind of sitting on the front line. They're saying, okay, how are we going to divide up this country?
You know, Alex, it's a very interesting theory. But Dima, well, I think, you know, since the events of 9/11, all of these foreign adventures, they never work out the way you expect.
Well, the people are always the losers. And let me here say a few words without politics. I mean, just 2 days ago, you know, the day before yesterday, 4 people were killed in a nasty terrorist bombing in Damascus, right? And the United States did not issue any statement about that. The West did not react.
The Western press didn't report it.
Simply because, as the New York Times reported about it in a very short way, it's a blow to Mr. Assad. If it's a blow to Mr. Assad, we don't condemn it.
No, let's talk about what they hit. Shiite pilgrims at a Shiite mosque, because
peaceful people.
Shiites are essentially the enemies of the United States, of the West, because Iran is the largest Shiite country. So Shiites are continually bombed in Pakistan, in Iraq, in Syria, and no one cares.
Absolutely.
No one, and Yemen as well.
Let me give you the second.
The White Helmets get an Academy Award. Okay? That's insult to injury.
I will just end with the human side of this all. I mean, in Yemen, we have, according to some reports, the worst humanitarian disaster since the World War II.
I'm glad you bring
No one is paying attention to this. You know, again, in Mosul, you know, we haven't yet taken Raqqa, but there is already a tragedy in Mosul. People are moving out in thousands. And just let me remind you that during the battle for Aleppo, the U.S. State Department spokesman said that people should not be moving out of place in the first place. They should not be blown by their own government and by the Russians. And then the same person says about Mosul. Yes. A certain displacement is inevitable in this situation.
You know, Alex, it's really interesting to me is that, you know, I understand in the U.S., you know, it's Obamacare. It's the Russia scare, the Russia hysteria. In Britain, you have continuous talk about Brexit. All of these stories that we have mentioned here have just dropped off the headlines.
Yeah, that's what I want to say. You have U.S. troops ramping up in Syria. There's conflict going on in Mosul, in Raqqa, and it's not being reported anywhere. So you've had an escalation of U.S. presence in Syria. You had Assad pretty much saying that anyone that's coming into Syria are invaders. That got reported by no one. I think Fox News maybe did a very 2-minute short on it, but they're not reporting about all the Marines, all the U.S. troops that are fighting currently right now in Iraq and in Syria to beat ISIS. And this is all happening under the Trump presidency, and it's not being reported.
Under the Trump presidency, Mark, I have said for years on this program is that American foreign policy has a certain genetic code, and it doesn't matter the administration. I'm going to hold to that to this day, because as much as I had hoped and listened to the words of candidate Trump and his President Trump, I don't see his vision of his foreign policy coming to fruition at all. Maybe I'm wrong. Go ahead.
Okay. There are conflicting signals again. He's cut funding to the FSA terrorists. He's slashed military aid. The Congress actually has slashed military aid to the regime in Ukraine by more than half, from 350 to 150 million. At the same time, he's has over 1,000 troops, Green Berets, Special Forces, Rangers, and artillery men in eastern Syria illegally right now.
Again, they're called advisors.
And he's got 2,500 more staged in Kuwait ready to enter in the next few days. He's increased drone strikes in Yemen by 430%, but he actually seems to really be targeting Al-Qaeda this time, which we all know are tacitly supported by Al-Qaeda in that country. So,
by Saudi Arabia.
I believe that Trump's primary interest in Syria now is not regime change. He does want a foot at the table, but primarily to decrease Iranian influence on the country in the aftermath once all of Syria is united again. And this falls into what I believe is Trump and Bannon's clash of civilizations, Huntington-esque view of the world, where they see themselves against radical Islam.
And we see a lot of players in the administration working in that direction. We're going to go to a short break, and after that short break, we'll continue our discussion on some of the stories in the news. Stay with RT. Welcome back to Crosstalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter LaBelle. To remind you, we're discussing some of the stories in the news. Okay, I'd like to go back to Alex here. Vault 7, WikiLeaks. An amazing story, and we know that for the entire 10-year history of WikiLeaks, they've gotten it right. Even if you don't like them, it's authentic. This is probably one of the most important, if not the most important, document dump they've ever given the public. Western media's response, ho-hum.
Yeah, this dwarfs Snowden, actually. We're talking about 8,000 documents.
Only 1% of it has been released.
Only 1% of it has been released. There's a lot more to come. We're talking about basically the blueprint of how the CIA's whole cyber weaponry arsenal. This is the blueprint. It's everything, and it's only 1% of it, and no one is really reporting on it. Yesterday, actually 2 days ago, Assange had a press conference, and no one picked it up. Well, MSNBC picked it up.
I heard for like a minute.
A minute, and then they moved to a bunch of analysts blasting Assange, basically.
So they wanted to talk about it, but they didn't want to listen to it.
And then they want to talk about how Assange is a spy, how he's a Putin troll, how he's this and how he's that. And they just went right back to the same talking points. They didn't really discuss the context, implications of having the whole cyber weaponry out there.
The interesting thing is, Mark, is that there's a lot to read there. But the main takeaways is that we had the CIA knew the vulnerabilities of consumer electronics, iPhones, Samsung televisions. Also, the accountability. I mean, it looks like they were building their own NSA. And also, we know that these documents had been floating around before WikiLeaks picked them up. But WikiLeaks is just a transmitter here, okay? Other people had access to these documents. So we have, inside the intelligence community, they have the leaks, okay? But like what they did with Mr. Flynn also. The leak is in the deep state.
Yeah. What WikiLeaks announced in their press release is that this wasn't released to them first, that ex-U.S. government hackers in the hacking underground world had access to these and then transferred some of them to WikiLeaks. And WikiLeaks is then taking a smaller portion of that, much smaller, and releasing it to the public, which means everyone in the hacking world could potentially have these. These are basically, a lot of this is the cyber warfare weapons of other countries that the CIA has taken and has all the ability to use on other countries, placing false attribution that they've did it. So basically, this already says what we already know. The U.S. government can commit cyber warfare anywhere in the world, including on itself, and make it look like someone else did it. We already knew this, all right? We already knew that the CIA can hack phones, TVs, computers, cars even. Absolutely unaccountable, undetectable assassination method, right? We knew all this, but people who said it were called conspiracy theorists, right? Well, now we know it's all true. The reason the Western media isn't reporting this is because it doesn't fit the narrative.
Well, okay, let's say
sell.
it's not fitting the narrative. This segues perfectly to Dima. So the Russiagate, the Russia hysteria, that could all because of a attribution issue that the CIA has a tool to leave somebody else's fingerprints. Another story that no one really wants to talk about because, as Mark said, we all say, this interrupts the narrative, is contrary to the narrative. And if it's contrary, they dismiss it.
Absolutely. Well, it's interesting that it seems to me they're already looking for a way out. A few prominent Democratic senators refused to participate in the investigation of Russiagate. Why? Because they are not sure it will be entirely objective. So they are already preparing a way for themselves to retreat, because if there is no evidence,
Dima, there's nothing there,
absolutely,
and they know it,
and they don't want to be exposed. I mean, the people who will be on that special investigators committee, they're exposing themselves to great risk, because if there is no evidence, and obviously, if there had been evidence, they would have released it long ago. If there is no evidence, it's going to be a shameful thing. But what I wanted to say about Mark, you're absolutely right that the United States, the CIA can spy on anyone, on Americans, on foreigners, but we, foreigners, were exposed even more than you, because there are no legal hurdles for spying against us. So the whole world is in the situation of the black population of South Africa in the times of the apartheid, because you have no way to influence this government, but this government has every way to influence you.
And the big picture is that you have countries that are exporting a lot of this American technology from Apple, from Microsoft, and all this technology is vulnerable. And WikiLeaks even made an offer to the tech community, let's work together to plug up these holes. And the tech community's response? No.
I think they prefer to work with the CIA. That's the partner they want.
So I mean, we're all exporting these gadgets that we know the CIA can tap into. And the companies behind these gadgets are unwilling to do anything about it.
Let's go back to this oversight issue, because I think this is really, really important here. Again, building their own NSA. Why?
JFK, just before he died, famously is reported to have said that he would splinter the CIA into 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the winds. And yet the CIA today is even more out of control, amok, its own deep state running the country than it ever has been before. During the Obama years, the CIA not only built its own NSA, its own complete cyber warfare and spying capabilities, completely outside of accountability and oversight, but it also built its own fleet of flying murder machines to commit assassination at the president's whim, right, without any trials, with no concern about territoriality around the world, based off a kill list composed by an assassination czar with a disposition matrix to move people up the ranks. It sounds positively Orwellian, science fiction, and that's what it is. The CIA is completely amok right now. And the reason why the Western media is not interested in this story, the liberal media, is because right now they're very interested in portraying as the CIA, the deep state, as the good guys that are protecting the country by waging this guerrilla war against the Trump administration. So this all ties in, and this is why getting rid of Flynn, Trump in the end acquiesced to it, is so very important, because Flynn wanted to restructure this out of control intelligence community and purge this deep state, of the intelligence services and the blob in the foreign state community, and he can't do it now, and no one else is going to do it, and Trump is still a prisoner of his own cabinet and deep state.
Okay. This goes in the direction where I want to go. Draining the swamp. Dima, where do we stand with that right now?
Well, I don't even know if that state is so deep, because I'm just a regular reader. I read the headlines in the New York Times and the Washington Post, and what do I read? How should one resist the Trump administration? That's the headline of an editorial, you know.
So they don't say how to resist the CIA.
Trump should recuse himself from being the president. That's also an editorial. So, I mean, I can't believe my eyes. I'm simply not used to reading this in the American media. You know, is it, what is it, a revolutionary subversive organization? Mainstream media?
No, this is the entire mainstream media with its East Coast, West Coast elites wanting to just bury their head in the sand. They simply can't accept certain outcomes. They're defeated, but they won't give up.
They're not defeated.
No. In a way that they know that their narrative has been defeated.
They would have been defeated in a democratic state, but they are not defeated now because they continue running the country. You know, basically.
But, you know, Alex. But if we look at some of the public opinion polls out there, and when you look at the popularity of the Democratic Party, the popularity of Hillary Clinton, and then you look at Donald Trump, his first 50 days in office, he's winning. If you ask the people. But if you ask the elites and the media, of course not.
That's the exact point, actually, I want to make, is that Trump has everyone in the establishment against him, from the mainstream media to the intelligence agencies to his very own party at times is against him. But yet he won the elections, and now today his popularity is going up. The popularity of Hillary Clinton and the others is going down. And the people are still supporting him. So his mandate from the people, especially that middle America, is growing stronger every day because he's taking action. He's taking action. He's doing the stuff that he promised to do.
You know, it's really
not enough, obviously.
It's not enough.
Well, considering all the
something.
obstacles here, but you know, Mark, people kind of make fun of often make fun of President Trump and Twitter. But it kind of back up Alex's point here. It's actually working, because if you want to know what the president's doing, you have to get on his Twitter account, and that's where you're going to find out. You're not going to find out in the mainstream media.
It is a useful way of going around the liberal media, which is an ideological class of praxis, right? They do operate right now as sock puppets of the CIA, the deep state, but they are their own ideological class. Let me make a voice of dissension here. We're all talking about Trump's foreign policy, right? On the domestic policy, Trump isn't draining the swamp. He's just filled the swamp with his own creatures. Some of them the same creatures as the Obama administration, who want to privatize government off, right? And that, of course, is where most American voters are focused on. They don't even really know yet what he's doing there. But instead of concentrating on that, which is a legitimate thing for the media to be concerned about and going after, they're all focused on this foreign policy issue, because it's this issue of the perception of the United States, its place in the world, exceptionalism, and hegemony. And they're going after him on the Russia thing and ignoring him on which is completely nonsensical and evidenceless as far as we can tell. And they're ignoring the very real neoliberal domestic front, where they should be following what he's doing.
You know, Alex, where do we go from here? Because it seems in many ways that when it comes to foreign policy that we're focusing on most here, do you see that Trump is making compromises with the deep state?
I think that Trump right now, foreign policy-wise, is a little lost. Like Rex Tillerson, we're not sure
where is he?
Where he is,
Rex!
what he's doing.
T-Rex, where are you?
Where is he? On the flip side, though, I think it's important to note that Trump, it seems to me, that he is looking for a win against ISIS. And that's huge, because he campaigned on that.
That's a very, very good point.
That's the clash of civilizations argument. Trump thinks he can win a victory against radical Islam, which is really
we're going to leave it on that point
Wahhabism.
there. Many thanks to my guests here in Moscow, and thanks to our viewers for watching us here at RT. See you next time, and remember, crosstalk rules.
I love you.